Looks like it's live. Ask me if I'm live.
Are you on?
We've gone live. Okay. Technical hurdle number 1 overcome. I wish I had some snappy public access intro music like Chris Ann Hall and everybody else, but I only have so many capabilities in the technology area. I have a favorite song for politics, but it's not public access and I don't want to be paying royalties. So I'll have to keep that a secret for the time being. Well, looks like we're about 30 seconds from showtime. Going over the last few notes here. I'd send out notifications, but I don't trust Facebook or YouTube. Maybe I should, but then again, technical limitations. Okay, I see the clock. We're coming down to 2, 1. Go live. Good evening, Hoosiers. How are things today? Yes, we are live. Double checking. Are you feeling confused, used, abused? Every day seems to bring another social media story of the intellectual abduction and the social emotional indoctrinational abuse of Hoosier children. Do you feel helpless and alienated? Are you feeling powerless to affect change and rescue and save our children? Have you seen the just released Parents' Bill of Rights, the Parents' Bill of Rights from Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita? You should read it. It's only 16 pages. Well, I read it, and instead of feeling empowered, my reaction after studying the document was to realize what a substantial wall of separation the government educational complex has erected around our vulnerable children. It is as though we have a domestic iron curtain. And let me tell you, that analogy is not by accident. The dysfunction of our educational system has been the carefully crafted design of socialists, collectivists, Marxists, and globalists extending back nearly 200 years. What is more shocking, Hoosiers, is that the entire scheme had its origin right here in Indiana. Yes, Indiana, flyover country. Can you say Robert Owen and the New Harmony Utopian Colony? More on that later. Do you feel like you are trapped playing a life and death game of whack-a-mole? Believe me, I played a lot of whack-a-mole in my history. And now the moles are winning. And you know what, Hoosiers? It's only going to get worse. Much, much worse. But do not despair. There is a way out of this mess. There is a path forward. There is a solution. The Constitution solution. Federal and Indiana. Well, hello. I'm Dr. Chris McGarrah from Warsaw, Indiana, with yet another episode of The Constitution Solution. In order to better understand the defense of Firewall, Indiana, we have been examining the Constitution of the sovereign state of Indiana. Tonight's episode is an analysis and commentary of Article 8, Education. As I have opined previously, in order to keep our constitutional republic, as Ben Franklin admonished, Hoosiers must understand their Constitution and how it was designed to secure our God-given natural rights and liberties. Life, liberty, property, and the right to support and defend those other rights in the best manner that one can. Politicians and others who usurp or do not recognize our God-given rights do so for one or more of three basic reasons: pragmatism, malice, or ignorance. That's right. Pragmatism, malice, or ignorance. So Hoosiers, what's in your politician? That was a paraphrase from founder James Otis Jr., 1761. A couple of quick notes here. Indiana has had two constitutions, the original from 1816 and the present one multiply amended from 1851. During this presentation, I will be reading from the Constitution of the State of Indiana, annotated by Andy Horning, that's Horning, in 2010. And you can find that document online. I have also the 1816 Constitution from the in.gov website. And I would like to call your attention to two important reference articles. They are both from the New American Magazine. The first is a September 29th, 1986 article, Separation of School and State by William F. Jasper, 1986. And the other is this, the entire June 21st issue of the New American Magazine entitled Save Our Children. And they also have a reprint of Jasper's article in this issue, New American Magazine, June 21st, 2021. It just hit the stands, and it's online. So, are you ready, Hoosiers? Fasten your seatbelts, because this is going to be a bumpy ride, intellectually. Why is education important to the preservation of our constitutional representative republic? As always, we should simply consult the founders. And in this case, Samuel Adams in 1775. And I quote Sam, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can easily be subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink under their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." Some point I'll memorize that. Chris Ann Hall does a great job from memory. Now, how did the founders and Sam Adams know this? How did they know? How did they know the predicament we would be in today in Indiana? Well, let me give you a clue. They had a lot of wisdom and virtue, and they did not attend government schools. They were homeschooled, and some went to private universities. Okay, here we go. The subject of education and the Indiana Constitution can only be understood by examining first the 1816 Constitution and understanding the intervening events and politics. So, just like Mr. Peabody and his pet boy Sherman on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, let's climb into the Wayback Machine and set the dial for 1816. In that Constitution, it was called Article 9. And I don't know any better way to make the comparison with today's Constitution other than to read Article 9 of the 1816 document. It's short. Don't worry. Section 1, knowledge and learning generally diffused, a reference to Sam Adams, through a community being essential to the preservation of a free government and spreading the opportunities and advantages of education through the various parts of the country, being highly conducive to this end, it shall be the duty of the General Assembly to provide by law for the improvement of such lands as are or hereafter may be granted by the United States to this state for the use of schools, and to apply any funds which may be raised from such lands or from any other quarters to the accomplishment of the grand object for which they are or may be intended. But no lands granted for the use of schools or seminaries of learning shall be sold by authority of this state prior to the year 1820. And the monies which may be raised out of the sale of any such lands or otherwise obtained for the purpose aforesaid shall be and remain a fund for the exclusive purpose of promoting the interest of literature and the sciences, and for the support of seminaries and public schools. So seminaries were sort of institutions of higher learning, may or may not have been associated with religious. Back to the document. The General Assembly shall, from time to time, pass such laws as shall be calculated to encourage intellectual, scientific, and agricultural improvement by allowing rewards and immunities for the promotion and improvement of arts, sciences, commerce, manufactures, and natural history, and to countenance and encourage the principles of humanity, honesty, industry, and morality. Morality in today's schools? I don't think they read the 1816 document. Section 2. It shall be the duty of the General Assembly, as soon as circumstances will permit, to provide by law for a general system of education, a sending in a regular gradation from township schools to a state university, wherein tuition shall be gratis and equally open to all. Just think about that. A general system of education. Now, they did not use the words uniform. And there's nothing there about compulsory education. Section 3, and for the promotion of such salutary end, the money which shall be paid as an equivalent by persons exempt from militia duty except in times of war, shall be exclusively and in equal proportion applied to the support of county seminaries. Also, all fines assessed for any breach of the penal laws shall be applied to said seminaries in the counties where they shall be assessed. almost done here. It was short. The General Assembly, at the time they lay off a new county, shall cause at least 10% to be reserved out of the proceeds of the sale of town lots in the seat of justice of such county for the use of a public library for such county, and at the same session they shall incorporate a library company under such rules and regulations as will best secure its permanence and extend its benefits. So libraries were going to be vital for the education of the people of Indiana. Okay, there you have it. Short, sweet, and to the point, inspired by the founders. Flexible, voluntary, and noble of pursuit. So, again, how did we get into this mess that we are in today? And how does Indiana fit into the history of educational deterioration? For that answer, we need only to rejoin Mr. Peabody and his pet boy Sherman in the Wayback Machine and set the dials this time for New Harmony, Indiana in 1825. Now, New Harmony, doesn't that sound charming, relaxing, pastoral, bucolic? It is and was a village in southwestern Indiana on the banks of the Wabash River, a short distance west from Evansville, right down there in the little toe of Indiana. So here is what happened between 1816 and 1851. There was a Welsh, as in Wales, textile manufacturer, philanthropist, and social reformer named Robert Owen. Remember that name, Robert Owen. He lived from 1771 to 1858. He made his fortune in a textile mill in New Lanark, Scotland. At that mill, he began to experiment with utopian socialism, and the cooperative movement. In 1817, he became heavily involved in socialism, and some referred to Robert Owen as the father of socialism. So, in 1824, in order to test his theories, he set out for the United States and Indiana and purchased the village of Harmony, Indiana, from a religious group that was abandoning it, heading back to Pennsylvania. The New Harmony Village of Unity and Mutual Cooperation opened with great fanfare in 1825. But like all such utopian socialist experiments, it deteriorated, collapsed, and was formally dissolved just 2 years later in 1827. Great success for socialism. Now, we're still not at the link, but Hoosiers, that is only the beginning of the story. Allow me to illuminate the philosophy of Robert Owens when it comes to property, family, children, and education. And then I will draw the link to the 1851 Constitution of Indiana. Allow me to read a passage from the Wikipedia article reference on Robert Owen. Stay with me. You'll find this interesting and illuminating. Owen proposed that communities of some 1,200 people should settle on land from 1,000 to 1,500 acres. Here we go. All living in one building. And there's a picture of this proposed New Harmony Utopia building. All living in one building with a public kitchen and dining halls. Owen also proposed that each family have its own private apartments and the responsibility for the care of its children only up till age 3. Does that sound a little bit like early Head Start that we have today? Thereafter, children would be raised by the community. It takes a village, Hillary. But the parents would have access to them at mealtimes and on other occasions. Owen further suggested that such communities be established by individuals, parishes, counties, or other governmental units. In each case, there would be effective supervision by qualified persons. Work and enjoyment of its results should be experienced communally. Owen believed his idea would be the best way to reorganize society in general and called his vision the New Moral World. Wow. How'd that work out for you, Robert? Owen also felt that religion hindered social progress. Enough said there. Now let's set the Wayback Machine to follow one of his sons, Robert Dale Owen, 1801 to 1877. Robert Dale Owen left after the collapse and then returned to New Harmony and became active in Indiana politics. We're getting close here, folks. He served as an Indiana state representative, a U.S. congressman, director of the U.S. diplomatic mission in Naples, Italy, and most importantly, Robert Dale Owen was elected as a delegate to the 1850 Indiana Constitutional Convention. Like his father, Robert Dale Owen was an avowed socialist. Here is where the conspiracy plot becomes thick. Article 8 of the 1851 Constitution involves some very important changes from the 1816 Constitution. Allow me to read Andy Horning's annotation on Article 8 before getting to the actual article. You gotta love conspiracy theories. Okay, here we go. This is Andy Horning's opinion annotation on 1851 Constitution, Article 8. He says, the history of Article 8 is itself important as it was dropped in on the last day of the convention without debate. Some feel it was an Owenite subterfuge, but more importantly, 1, this section replaced religious schools, free ones paid for by churches, and seminaries paid for by the state, with secular education paid for by a state endowment, not directly by the locals themselves. And secondly, university or college training and state funding was discussed and dismissed in 1851. The establishment of normal training school at university and a university fund to pay for it as well as the several incorporated colleges in this state, was tabled during the 1851 convention and never again addressed. What does that mean? That means that all state funding to colleges and universities is unconstitutional in Indiana. Read it. Unconstitutional. Okay. I go on with his blistering annotation here. Only by making identical schools funded equally across rich and poor areas would this make any sense at all, given the generally bad nature of political education. Now, as you know, we have a local/state hybrid that's anything but equal and or uniform. Rich kids obviously get better schools, only now it's with poor kids' folks' tax dollars. And all schools are now run by politicians and unions, making them an international embarrassment. And perversely, we make parents pay for books, yet we make taxpayers pay for exotic sporting facilities, cafeterias, and other non-educational claptrap that'd make the proponents of good education spin in their graves. Well, enough for the commentary. Let's go on to read what ended up being the 1851 and present Constitution of Indiana, Article 8, Education. Excuse me. Section 1. This just as Section 1 is where the whole thing is. The rest of it's just details. Excuse me. Knowledge and learning, general, diffused throughout a community, being essential to the preservation of a free government, it should be the duty of the General Assembly to encourage, by all suitable means, moral, intellectual, scientific, and agricultural improvement, and provide by law for a general and uniform system of common schools wherein tuition shall be without charge and equally open to all. This is one of those things. I mean, that's that one run-on sentence there has a lot of stuff to pick apart in it, but you'll have to study it. Section 2. The Common School Fund shall consist of the Congressional Township Fund and the lands belonging thereto. And they go on to list them. The Surplus Revenue Fund, the Saline Fund, and the lands belonging thereto, the Bank Tax Fund, and the fund arising from the 114th section of the Charter of the State Bank of Indiana, the fund to be derived from the sale of county seminaries and the money and property heretofore held for such seminaries, and from the fines assessed for breaches of the penal laws of the state, and from all forfeitures which may accrue, all lands and other estate which shall escheat to the state for want of heirs or kindred entitled to the inheritance, all lands that have been or may hereafter be granted to the state where no special purpose is expressed in the grant, and the proceeds and of sales thereof, including the proceeds of the sale of the swamp lands granted to the state of Indiana by the Act of Congress of the 28th of September, 1850, after deducting the expenses of selecting and draining the same. Taxes on the property of corporations that may be assessed by the General Assembly for common school purposes. That's not as frivolous a paragraph as you might think. Here's Andy Horning's commentary on the above. Nothing in what I just read said personal property tax. Closest it came to taxes on the property of corporations. I'll repeat. No personal property taxation is authorized for these common schools. You didn't read it in the proceeding paragraph because it's not there. And there goes half of your property tax bill. It's unconstitutional. Section 3. The principal of the common school fund, not the principal of the school, but the principal amount of the common school fund shall remain in a perpetual fund, which may be increased, but shall never be diminished. And the income thereof shall be inviolably appropriated to the support of the common schools and to no other purpose whatsoever. Andy Horning comments, there was to be an inviolable trust to pay for all this, and we don't have one anymore. I would have to look into the details of the Indiana budget for that and the details, but we'll see. Section 4. The General Assembly shall invest in some safe and profitable manner all such portions of the common school fund as have not heretofore been entrusted to the several counties, and shall make provision by law for the distribution among the several counties of the interest thereof. Section 5. If any county shall fail to demand its portion of such interest for common school purposes, the same shall be reinvested for the benefit of the county. Section 6. The several counties shall be held liable for the preservation of so much of the said fund as may be entrusted to them, and for the payment of the annual interest thereon. Section 7. All trust funds held by the state shall remain inviolate and be faithfully and exclusively applied to the purposes for which the trust was created. Section 8. There shall be a state superintendent of public instruction whose method of selection, tenure, duties, and compensation shall be prescribed by law. Now, this was amended in 1972 and November of 1984. Now, the state superintendent of public instruction was originally limited to a 2-year term, but now, since a 2017 law making the state superintendent of public instruction is a politically appointed office by the governor. Ooh, I forgot, that's another power of the governor. I better write that in there. Power, I think we're up to 17. Okay. I keep track of what our constitutional governor is and is not supposed to do. And that, folks, was the 1816 Constitution, Article 8, Education. So that, what I just read, is how the socialists sowed the seeds of liberty erosion into the education article of the 1851 Indiana Constitution. Now, Hoosiers, I know that this has been a presentation of a great deal of in the weeds and what we call baseball insider type legal intricacies. But remember, to understand an 1851 contract, you must examine the original intent in 1851 terms and context. However, in a case like this, where there is a paucity of debate documentation, the task will be a bit more difficult. Is the education situation propagated by Article 8 hopeless? Must we have the school situation we have now? Is it etched in stone? No, it's not. It's just going to take some work on the part of we, the people. Remember, we, the people, are sovereign. And don't let any Indiana politician or official forget that. And remember that the Constitution solution includes, in the case of Indiana, Article 16 amendments. So Hoosiers, in order to better prepare yourself for the task ahead, I implore you to read William F. Jasper's article from the New American Magazine entitled Separation of School and State. Either the original 9/29/86 article or the reprint in the June 21st, 2001 issue of the New American Magazine. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But in the article, Mr. Jasper reviews the history of education in the United States and the great success of the non-government private education system. He chronicles the demise of learning under the influence of the Owenite socialists and progressive reformers such as Dewey. Federal involvement in education is, of course, unconstitutional. It does not appear anywhere in the U.S. Constitution, let alone Article 1, Section 8, and as such is null and void. Mr. Jasper makes the case for private schools and honest competition and how such a system is and will be more effective and even more accessible than the current government model. And there is the cost. Did you know that in this recently passed Indiana budget, the appropriations for education will be $12.35 billion with a B, billion dollars, and $12.76 billion respectively for the next 2 years. And the politicians are bragging that this represents an increase of $1.9 billion from the last budget session. And Hoosiers, I ask you, what has or what will and has $25 billion purchased you for the next 2 years? How about unacceptable performance rates, condoms on cucumbers and other pornographic things, Marxist indoctrination, and, despite the denials of officials, a new, vicious, permanent system of racial bullying? Makes your head want to explode. Allow me to read the last sentence from William Jasper's article. This pretty much sums up the situation. And I quote, "After reading the intentions of the educrats mentioned in this article and hosts of others unnamed here, it is abundantly clear that the creation of a public school system was a matter of control, not education. One in which compulsory government schools ripped children from families, divorced them from their faith and their local communities, and remolded them in the image of materialists, atheists, and socialists." End quote. That's what we have today, isn't it? To sum up, I want to suggest that all concerned Hoosiers take a deep breath, step back a few paces, and take in a wide perspective. Stop playing whack-a-mole. You know, of course, that the presentation of simultaneous myriad of issues is all part of the plan of the Marxists, collectivists, communists, and globalists. There is an unholy alliance between politicians, the government schools, the public sector unions, and the socialist Marxist university elite. It is all classic Hegelian dialectic, or for simple creatures like myself, it's smoke and mirrors meant to distract from and ensure the predetermined goal of the socialists. Now remember, Hoosiers, education is the goal, not schools. Education. The goals are separation of education and state, separation of school and state. In order to secure our God-given natural rights and liberties and to rescue our constitutional republic, we, the people, must reclaim our government and restore the original intent of the founders. Now more than ever, we need the Constitution solution. Got it? So, in closing, Hoosiers, remember, doctor's orders. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. And above all, keep your distance. Keep your distance from all the socialists, statists, globalists, collectivists, politicians, and bureaucrats. Because now, Hoosiers, you know exactly who they are. The curtain has been pulled back, and they can no longer hide. I see one. There he went. So, I'll be back next time on Thursday, July 8th, 2021 at 7 p.m. for a discussion of the Indiana Constitution, Articles 9 and 10, State Institutions and Finance. Be there or be square. And as they say at the conclusion of every episode of JBS Constitution Corner, just don't know your Constitution, live it. Good night, Hoosiers.